You're listening to Strange by Nature, your guide to the strange, weird, unbelievable, and improbable wonders of the natural world.
Hello everyone, thanks for being here today. I am Kirk Mona, and I am joined today by Rachel Gimza and Victoria Thompson. We are all professional naturalists who together have scoured the world for weird and wonderful wonders just to please your mammalian brain's desire for novelty. Isn't that nice?
Hello everyone, and welcome
Let's do
to the
this.
show. Got something a little bit different for you here this week. The show, you might have noticed, is longer than normal because there are not 3 of us here in the room, but actually 4 of us for today's show.
Woohoo!
Yay!
Hey.
Yes, we do have a guest with us. We have Laura from the For the Love of Nature podcast, who has joined us this week to share one of her strange nature facts with us. So we are excited to have you here. Welcome.
Hey everybody, glad to be here.
We're so excited to have you with us.
This is totally right up my alley, as you guys know. For anyone who has listened to our podcast, we love talking about weird, strange stuff. So this was not at all a stretch to find something.
Awesome.
Excellent.
You know, we've heard your podcast. Obviously, you've heard your podcast. Some of our listeners have not. Can you tell us a little bit about what your podcast is?
Yeah. So our the podcast For the Love of Nature, it's myself and then my co-host Katie. We kind of call it a comedy nature podcast. It's all factual, at least for the most part. Sometimes we have to make corrections. But it is intended to be factual information presented in an interesting and funny way. And our goal is for people to listen to it and then leave caring about nature a little bit more than they did when they started. We think that we usually have people who are what we call nature novices listen. So people who are just kind of wanting to feel out things, wanting to know more. But we have a range of audience members, from our 8-year-old fan club to our nature experts.
It's precious.
What's like a good starter episode for someone to dive in and learn about it?
Oh man. No, it's okay. We go back and forth between like really sciencey and then just ridiculous. So if you want like good, intense science, The Trees Know is a good one. That's about plant sentience. And then if you want ridiculous,
Always good.
probably Could You Ride That? Where Katie and I talk about different animals that we've always wanted to ride,
Right.
and the logistics
dog.
of doing so.
Amazing.
I've always wanted to ride like a giant Saint Bernard. I know I can't, and that would hurt the dog. But
No,
they're so
yeah, and
loud.
we had some rules first, of course. But yeah, I've always wanted to ride a polar bear. That's my number one.
Nice. Well, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited. This is my first time being a guest star on anybody else's podcast, so...
Excellent. Well, we do appreciate it. I'm going to get things kicked off here. As we've alluded to many times on the show, each of us maintains a list of topics we'd like to talk about on future shows. We keep the list secret because we want to surprise each other. I know I'm constantly adding topics to my list because I'm constantly reading interesting things in books, magazines, research papers, news articles, and such. But once in a while, people also send me ideas.
Oh, absolutely. Those are the
Nice.
best ones.
Now, numerous people have sent me today's topic.
I know what it is. I
you?
know what it is.
And they all said something along the lines of, well, this seems right up your alley. Or even, I can't believe you haven't talked about this yet. One of my co-hosts even forwarded me a version of this story, which is kind of fun.
Of course.
Yeah, I think it was me, Kirk,
I
and it
think
was
it was.
forwarded to me by a listener who is a friend of mine.
Now, naturally, this story involves birds. I'm kind of a bird freak, but it also involves migration, and it is strange, so it pretty much checks all of my boxes. And yes, I did hear about this like literally months ago, but the reason I haven't covered it until today is actually because it's so weird and unbelievable that I wanted to make sure that I not only understood it properly, but that I could even explain it to other people.
Fair enough.
So here goes. Now, I've talked about migration and birds many times on the show. I think migration is utterly fascinating and strange. And it is so often, I find that it's misunderstood or simply perhaps I should say it's not understood. And so we use this bogus term instinct. And I really don't like that word. At least I don't like the way that it is often used, right? Because
Okay.
I think all too often instinct becomes a shorthand for, well, we don't know.
They must just know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like something that's just ingrained in like your DNA or your makeup or whatever that you're supposed to just know. You just know. You don't, it's right there.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, and to be clear, there are things that are instinctual,
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
right? For example, when your hand is cold at night, you might tuck it under your leg. No one taught you to do
All
that,
the time.
right? Yeah, you didn't make a conscious decision to do it. It's just instinctual.
Yeah. Or like
Mhm.
I've recently had a baby, and just seeing all the stuff that she already knows how to do, like all the reflexes, is crazy.
Exactly, exactly. Now, I think we ascribe this word instinct to a lot of migration that isn't instinctual at all. I think to be clear, the urge to migrate is instinctual. No one tells a bird to do it. However, the methods they use are something we can endeavor to understand. I talked about how birds migrate at night by using stars, right?
So cool.
That was really cool.
Well, I mean, it is instinctual to use the stars, but too often, instead of trying to understand the mechanics of how birds migrate using things like stars, we simply shrug and think that they are migrating by instinct instead of because of instinct. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. That's a good breakdown. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that brings us to today's story and what I'm going to call a potential discovery. And I'll come back to why I use the word potential in a moment.
Oh, good.
So it's been known for a pretty long time that birds seem to have some sort of internal compass, right?
Yeah.
Homing pigeons can lose their way if they fly over certain areas with high iron content in the ground. They also get lost if you simply like glue or strap a magnet to their head, which is
Oh, poor pigeons.
Why would
Yeah.
you
Sad.
why would you do a magnet or strap a magnet to a pigeon?
well, it's a good question. I mean, if you think that birds are using, say, a magnetic field or sensing the magnetism somehow, you need to put a stronger magnetic field by their head and see if that messes with their internal compass, just like it would on like a hand compass you would use. So you
Okay.
set it on their
Yeah.
head.
But
and see what
process
happens.
of elimination.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the only way to
exactly.
know.
Science.
So the point is that we've known for a long time that birds have some sort of sense of magnetism. There's been debate as to like how, like what that mechanism is, and some researchers speculated that they literally had
Yeah, yeah.
some kind of like ferromagnetic internal compass, literally iron in their bodies. There is naturally iron in all of our bodies, and they speculated that it was somehow mysteriously affected by the Earth's magnetic field, and that somehow, equally mysteriously, the birds could just feel or sense the field.
That'd be cool.
Very cool,
But-
yeah.
It'd be so. How would that even be possible? Like to be able to. It's not. Yeah.
Yeah, the mechanism is always the difficult part.
Yeah, we don't know, right? Exactly. The mechanism
Right.
is the hard part. So there was another line of reasoning that perhaps the birds could actually see the magnetic field of the Earth. So if this was the case, it would be amazing for migration. We're not sure what it would look like, but even if you could just picture like cartoonish longitudinal lines superimposed on the Earth, you can see
It might
how
be like
that would-
I bet it's like seeing like the aurora. Because
Oh.
isn't that made with like electricity? Like it's like it has to do with the magnetic.
Yeah, I mean, it's related. It has to do with the solar wind and charged particles and whatnot. But I mean, it does somewhat follow those magnetic lines. So again, we don't know what it would look like, right? But it's sort of that idea that maybe they can see something that we
Yeah.
can't see. And if they can see something that we can't
Yeah.
see, that would be hugely helpful for navigation. Well, we now think the latter explanation, the one with the eyes, may actually be the right answer.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
Scientists have identified a protein, actually, in birds' eyes called cryptochrome 4. And scientists were able to show recently that cryptochrome 4 from the eyes of European robins is sensitive to magnetic fields when the cryptochrome has been hit with blue light. Now, weirdly, when they tried that experiment on cryptochromes from non-migratory
Right.
species, such as chickens, there was no change from the magnetic field.
Huh.
This would suggest that there may be something to the cryptochromes being somehow different in migratory birds,
Like,
and we can
Yeah.
speculate that perhaps some migratory birds can sense that that magnetism is affecting the cryptochromes in their eyes, and again, perhaps birds can thus, in some sense, actually see the magnetic field of the Earth. And
right.
that's why I'm calling this a potential discovery. It is interesting and curious, but I'm not yet totally convinced that we have all of the evidence.
Okay, that's really cool, but also the change in subjects. A European robin, which is kind of like a warbler for the North American listeners,
Kinda.
like the size and like kind of like a little. It's a bird.
Cute little chubby. A little chubber.
Yeah, it's a little
Sure.
chubber. Does not look like our robins.
Nope.
And a chicken.
No.
Just the size difference is just.
Yeah. I mean,
The vision thing, though, makes a lot of sense because I know that, I mean, birds can see UV. So they've already got a lot on us as far as vision. So it would make sense that
Right.
perhaps there's even more to it.
Sure. Well, and Rachel, the point of it being a chicken, too, is that, of course, chickens are non-migratory. And so the fact that we see this with the cryptochromes from the robin's eyes, which are migratory and don't see the reaction from the magnetic field in the chickens, that points to the fact that maybe this does have something to do with migration. And that's sort of one of the pieces of evidence, if you will. Now, the story does get weirder. There's more weirdness going on. What really made the headlines wasn't that maybe birds can see magnetic fields. It wasn't that maybe we have found the molecule responsible, but rather the proposed mechanism for the molecule working is what made the headlines. So here we go. Researchers propose that cryptochrome 4 allows birds to see magnetic fields using quantum entanglement.
What?
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 Okay, we've brought physics into this now.
Yeah, I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Oh, man.
And oh man, so this is part of why I didn't want to do this story.
Yeah.
Haha, you shot yourself in the foot there. Nice job.
Because
How many hours of research did you do for this episode, Kirk?
a lot, a lot. So I now need to explain quantum entanglement, and it's an incredibly deep rabbit hole to go down. So I'm going to try to give like the super basic version, all right, of what's happening in this experiment. So when blue light hits the protein, it affects electrons, and what happens is that you get pairs of electrons that are entangled at the quantum level. Now, this pair is in something called superposition. Basically, these two electrons will always be spinning in the same direction. The direction they're spinning isn't important or even, in one sense, knowable. But what is important is that because they are now linked up or quantum entangled, these two electrons will always be spinning in the same direction as each other, even when they become separated. And that spin direction, I should point out, is essentially random. However, when there is a magnetic field present, it can affect the probability of which direction the paired electrons end up spinning. So this quantum superposition appears and disappears extremely quickly, but it can ultimately affect the arrangement of the protein and perhaps even be detected by the bird.
Okay.
So I know this seems pretty out there and like a lot of speculation, like, well, maybe they see something, but the evidence actually is mounting. So in another study, scientists tested European robins again, and they tested their ability to sense direction, which they could do, but then they repeated the experiment, exposing the birds to an extremely weak magnetic source. Okay, so that was the only variable that was changed in the experiment.
Yeah.
And when they did this, they exposed them to that extremely weak magnetic field. I should point out that magnetic field was so weak, it could only have affected something on the quantum level. There wasn't like a big magnet they stuck next to their head.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay.
So when they flipped on the magnetic field, ta-da, the birds could no longer have their sense of direction. They couldn't tell which way to go.
Oh, wow.
So that implies that that extremely weak magnetic field, which could have only affected, quantum entangled particles,
Whoa.
caused the birds to lose their sense of direction, which seems like pretty good evidence.
Yeah. So it must, like, it really just, I mean, if you take away nothing else, it's that they're so incredibly sensitive. Like, it's like fine-tuned to the max.
Yeah, it's pretty it's pretty amazing. Now, why am I so skeptical? As interesting as all this is, these were experiments performed on a single molecule or on single molecules that were no longer in retinas. This is very preliminary research, and we are far from understanding how the actual proteins perform in an actual eye. It is entirely possible this is a weird effect scientists are seeing, and it has absolutely nothing to do with bird vision and migration. But like I talked about, the clues are adding up, and more research is being done. So it'll be really fascinating to see if this does bear out in the future. We usually say that quantum mechanics is fascinating, but has no real-world effect on giant meat puppets such as ourselves. But interestingly, this research would seem to contradict that and show that for some birds, maybe, just maybe, quantum effects in their eyes are actually allowing them to see the magnetic fields of the Earth.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's amazing.
I have a feeling this is one of those subjects that we'll be revisiting at some point. Like, we'll loop back around to it because, time will tell on this one, I guess, if this bears out and becomes something that we know to be true, or if it was just a weird quirk and a bunch of coincidences and someone figures out, oh, no, it was actually something else going on. But really cool new science coming out. Tell you what, we're going to go to a break. And when we come back, we'll have some more Strange by Nature for everybody. Strange by Nature podcast is brought to you by listeners like you who have joined the Society of Strange, our membership group on over at patreon.com/strangebynature. Society of Strange members can join at one of 3 different membership levels and help support the show, and also get some fun stuff like water bottle stickers or access to super secret content. So a thank you to those who have joined already to help make this podcast possible. If you haven't joined yet, we'll see you soon over at the Society of Strange at patreon.com/strangebynature. See you soon.
Hey, we're back, everybody, and it is my turn. Okay.
I'm excited.
So, I was trying to think, okay, what weird topics, what do I like? What have you guys already covered? And this topic came up a few times in our own podcast, but we've never talked about it extensively, and I was like, perfect, now's the time.
Okay.
So I'm going to be discussing how most of us grew up fearing that death by quicksand was an absolute possibility, thanks to movies like The Jungle Book, The Princess Bride, Swiss Family Robinson.
Right.
But it's not that deadly. Disappointingly, maybe. But so it keeps
so
coming up too, like on
prepared.
other things.
I
know, especially because as a kid, I was really into like worst case scenario survival guides.
Right.
And I had down like how I was going to survive quicksand because it was going to happen eventually.
There was a whole
absolutely.
Mythbusters episode about it.
Yeah. So
Rachel actually talked about quicksand on one of our previous episodes,
I did, yes.
but I'm sure
Aha.
you have all new information, so that's
Yes.
cool.
I want to know more about quicksand.
Let's learn more.
Okay. Well, I'm so terribly sorry. I didn't know that you already covered some of it. Hopefully I'll
Totally
cover some
fine.
different aspects.
Yeah.
I was more.
course.
I think when I talked about it, I was more talking about the Alaskan mud flats.
Gotcha.
The differences there in between that and quicksand, where it actually is nervous.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it. Let's hear what you came up with. I'm sure it will be a totally different take.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to talk about like what is it? How does it form? Like the quicksand 101.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully, Rachel, I'm not gonna repeat too much of what you said.
You're fine. Honestly, we don't talk about this much, and I don't know about the rest of you, but as soon as I have recorded whatever my topic is, most of that knowledge just exits my brain. So I do not
Like school.
remember what
Oh,
I
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
I hope you retain something.
I retain bits of it.
Yeah.
Just enough for trivia night.
I pretty
Exactly.
quickly forget some of our topics.
Yeah. Well, as I was researching more about quicksand, because I knew like some of the basics, but I was dying laughing because so it wasn't just, you know, our generation that has thought that quicksand was a scary thing. Quicksand hit its peak in movies in the 1960s.
Really?
1 in 35 movies had quicksand in it.
Wow.
That's so many movies with quicksand.
I know. Like,
Yeah.
it was like, I'm sure if you grew up as a kid in the 60s, you were like, it is definitely going to happen.
Oh,
Lawrence
Like,
of
I'm gonna walk
Arabia. Lawrence of Arabia is my favorite movie.
Yes.
That has quicksand.
It was mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mine was
Well, the films that are being made more recently, when we were growing up, were made by people who were watching those older films.
Yes. Well, right. Or like the Swiss Family Robinson was definitely around then, and Princess Bride was like a spoof of, you know, that. But the really scarring one for me was the live action Jungle Book from 1994, which very few people have seen.
I've
Oh.
seen
I have
that
not
one.
seen that.
Oh, I never saw
have.
that one.
So
Yep.
good. Highly recommend. But in that, a guy dies in quicksand, and as a kid, it was horrifying because the thought of,
Right.
slowly suffocating or drowning just is like, oh my gosh.
And you're done.
Not great.
Yeah. So turns out quicksand isn't as dangerous as Hollywood would like us to believe. So quicksand is
Darn.
really just a soupy mixture of sand, clay, silt, and salt. Almost always salt is a factor. Rarely is it not. Something about the viscosity, how it changes it, that becomes really, really saturated. And it makes it a non-Newtonian fluid. So also
What?
bringing in
Like
some
ketchup.
physicsy stuff here.
So like slime?
Exactly,
No,
like
we're not going
ketchup
into
or like
why ketchup?
Yes, ketchup, Rachel.
No, why is that a non-Newtonian fluid?
because when you shake it, it becomes more liquid.
Thank the ketchup.
Oh no.
You hit the 57.
Liquefies upon spanking. I feel like there's something.
There's a T-shirt on that. Yeah.
So non-Newtonian fluid, meaning that it does not follow Newton's viscosity laws. So it just doesn't act like it should. So as soon as something with mass is set on top of it, it liquefies. Its viscosity rapidly drops. So this happens one of two ways. Either an underground water source with the water like percolating up through the sand, it's kind of pushing the sand apart, making it so there's no friction in between anything.
Right.
Kind of like maybe an aquifer or something.
Like a spring.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or right, like even on the edge, any kind of underground, even from like seeping from a river on the banks kind of
Okay.
action even. And then the other way is vibrations, typically from earthquakes. So the earth is just like, it's getting shook up so much, the water is being kind of pressed a little bit at a time and liquefies, which is how a lot of buildings collapse during earthquakes.
So
Because it
hold
actually
on.
turns the base into quicksand.
You're
Yes.
not only dealing with an earthquake that you
Right.
can't tell is coming, but maybe you take 2 steps and all of a sudden you're in quicksand.
Right. So and it's so it might not be a detriment to humans, but
Right.
buildings, it is not good. Buildings have to worry about quicksand.
That just reminds me. Have you seen Mark Rober's video?
Yes. I actually do mention him at the very end because it's one of the coolest videos. So though that's kind of how quicksand happens. What happens when you fall in? Well, unlike in the movies, you do not get sucked down and drowned.
Disappointing.
Yeah. Because in the movies,
Or a relief.
I mean,
Right.
if I'm going to experience quicksand, I want to like feel the fear that has been instilled in me, at least a little bit.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Right, because in the movies it makes it seem like it's feet deep. Well, most of the spots really aren't that deep to begin with. But not only that, the main reason why you're not going to sink down is because you are less dense than quicksand.
There it is.
So you float.
All right.
Which seems really weird and like would be a fun kind of experiment to try, like floating on sand, because it would feel very like just different.
I mean, you do float on sand whenever you lay on it.
Yeah, true.
Wow. Yeah.
So humans have a density of 62 pounds per cubic foot, and quicksand is 125, so it's double our weight. So the sand is mostly going to sink, you're mostly going to float. And they've done experiments with this with like aluminum, like little round balls that they can change densities, make them more like a human, less like a human, and like try all different experiments with them, and almost without
Fail?
what do I want to say? Without fail, they almost always float. Or go back up after a few minutes.
So the word almost is the key word.
Yeah.
I don't want to be included in that almost part.
Right.
Maybe just a
So-
little.
Yeah.
Wow.
That says that, struggling in the movies, people are, the more you struggle, the more you get sucked down.
Right.
Struggling would definitely make you get more stuck. But it wouldn't cause you to go down more.
Gotcha.
So when you sink into the wet sand, it's a lot like being in concrete. And it creates a vacuum. This happened to me once, not in quicksand, but in mud. I remember when I was a lot younger.
Oh, I've lost shoes.
And being
in mud.
real freaked out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because it creates such an intense vacuum down there
Mhm.
that to break free of that,
Mm-hmm.
it takes 100,000 newtons of force, which is the same strength that you would need to lift a medium-sized car.
Oh, whoa.
I'm
So,
good, thank
yeah,
you.
good luck getting your foot out.
Not happening.
Yeah. So the only way to get out of quicksand is to wiggle your appendages. Like, say your foot gets stuck, you're supposed to like wiggle it in a round motion
Sure.
so that water starts to seep in to lessen the vacuum.
Kind of like in an avalanche, you're supposed to like wiggle to pack the snow in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because
You're
it's
creating
starting
an
to
air
press
pocket.
the sand too. Yeah. So you're creating a water pocket in
Right.
this quicksand.
Okay.
And then you're supposed to move very slowly, because the more slowly you move, the less of a vacuum is created. And lean backwards so you're not floating face down. And that
Solid
you do start
advice.
to become more buoyant to go towards the surface. Yeah.
So just, relax into the embrace of the quicksand.
Exactly. It sounds very
Zen.
counterintuitive,
Mhm.
but just relax.
Not alarming at all.
Well, like, I wonder, you hear about people, like, one of the places you find quicksand is in tidal flats. So I suppose if you were to lay back, once the tide
Yes.
came in, it would
Mhm.
sort of like start to rehydrate the sand and sort of change. I guess you'd kind of, they'd start to float even more then. But man, that would be a pretty terrifying weight as the water came in.
Yes, and that is the reason. So in the bleak aspect of quicksand, so although you may not get sucked down into quicksand and like suffocate on that, the way that people do die from quicksand is usually either exposure or drowning when the tide comes in.
Right.
Because you are going to encounter quicksand in wetlands, in marshes, shorelines, riverbanks, so where there's already going to be a lot of other water. So your risk of drowning in the actual water is high, not in the quicksand itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to add to my list of ways that we probably won't die in Minnesota, tidal quicksand.
Yeah.
I mean,
Perfect.
I did have a kid sacrifice his shoe to the marsh once.
Oh, we all been there. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure.
I had a kid who stepped into some mud and their shoe just vanished, never to be seen again. And we dug and dug at the whole area, and it was never found.
They'll be fossilized.
Yeah.
Yeah, or they'll
don't
be
know
like
about
those
that.
bog people.
Oh, sure.
Yes,
Hands and
the
everything.
bog people.
Yeah, which is another really
Bog
cool-
shoes.
Future
Yeah.
topic. Yeah.
Shoes.
Bog shoes are something
That could be a
different,
band
but yeah.
name.
I'd listen to that.
So quicksand can be avoided easily if you poke the ground in front of you. If you're walking in a wetland with a stick, that's what they suggest. And not, weirdly enough, don't wear shoes if you're walking in an area that there is potential quicksand. I guess to lessen your chances of getting stuck.
I guess.
But I'm sure that, if
Well-
I'm walking in a wetland where there might be quicksand, I'm probably also worried about a couple of other things that are living in a wetland too
Right, right.
that I would want
Yeah.
shoes for.
Even just broken glass.
Right. Alligators.
Oh,
like
God.
Venomous snakes.
Yep.
Oh,
Right.
no. I will say,
So-
though, it makes sense about... Oh, yeah, broken glass. It makes sense, though,
Yeah.
about about not wearing shoes, though, because, we've touched on it, but I've definitely gotten my shoe stuck in the marsh just in, Minnesota. and I could get my foot out, but I had to
But not the shoe.
dig
Yeah.
for the shoe.
Yeah.
It seems weird though that like you can get your foot out, but your shoe can't come out. Like somehow
Well,
they're different, right?
also
Yeah, it's this. Your foot's not vacuumed. The shoe is vacuumed.
Right.
Yeah.
also like the texture is different. Your foot is generally fairly smooth, whereas shoes tend to be a lot more textured and has more surface area
Yeah.
for them to.
Always get a pedicure before
I
going
would
to
guess
Quicksand.
though. Yeah, my foot is pretty textured.
Gross.
I would guess though that correct me if you read something else, Laura, but I would guess the reason they suggest not wearing shoes is that your feet are very sensitive and have nerves, and if you start to step on an area that is starting to suck your foot down, you're gonna sense it.
I think that's what it is.
That's interesting.
Because they were showing there was a video of a man who was walking on the beach, and you could see him walking on top of the quicksand right before it changed. It was looks like he was walking on a waterbed. So yeah, if you
Whoa.
could feel that shift in your feet, it might give you the split second to pull back.
I think shoes or no, if you feel the earth jiggling under your feet,
That's nature
true.
telling you, hey.
yeah, that's a big warning right there. The earth's not supposed to like wave under your feet like a waterbed.
Yeah.
That's nature
You might
telling
want to
you,
take a step
stop.
back.
Right.
So that's the quicksand as we know it. In my digging though for quicksand, I also encountered dry quicksand, which is
Okay.
far scarier than wet quicksand.
Okay.
So we don't have to worry really about wet quicksand. It's a myth. Dry quicksand, that is what you absolutely do need to worry about. You will probably suffocate and die in dry quicksand.
Oh, lovely.
It's when air is blown through the sand and it's so light and fluffy that the sand particles can barely hold their own weight, much less anything else. Anything that is dropped into it will immediately sink. There's no slow sinking. It's like ploop into water, and it sinks straight to the bottom.
Oh, I don't like
And so that would be like more probably of what was in Lawrence of Arabia, like with the dry sand.
That sounds more like the sand in Princess Bride too.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I mean,
totally.
I will reiterate that these are both. Well, Lawrence of Arabia is based on fact, but I think the quicksand incident is not.
Yeah.
Good to
Well,
point
and
out there.
that brings up a good point. So although there are rumors of things like this happening in the desert, caravans disappearing, animals going under, dry quicksand has never been found in nature so far.
Oh, wow. There you go.
So although it is terrifying, thank goodness no one's encountered it yet. Although it is possible, it's only been created in a lab so far, or by mechanical means.
And
so this is where Kirk was
should
talking about
stay
Mark
there.
Rober.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe it can
But
stay in the lab.
if you see Mark Rober's video, he's a really cool engineer, inventor, and he created a hot tub full of sand that he turns into dry quicksand, and his nephews are playing in it, and it looks like they're jumping into water,
They're
but
swimming,
it's sand.
yeah.
It's so cool.
Wow.
And like the second he turns off the mechanism, it goes
Becomes
solid.
a solid.
Yeah, totally
Yeah.
solid. It's
Yeah.
mind-boggling. If you haven't seen it, definitely do check it out.
Yeah, it's very cool.
So, have the people who've done experiments creating dry quicksand come up with any places on Earth that it could potentially occur in nature, or is it just kind of not?
I think their
likely?
theory is that possibly it could happen in the desert with certain sandstorms, depending on the wind currents. And because it almost, when they do it in the lab, it almost creates like a vortex, like a tornado. So I suppose if there was a tornado in the desert, possibly. But I think things would have to be just right.
Okay.
In Mark's video, he has like a PVC pipes with holes
Under
in
the
it.
sand.
Yeah, under the sand, and it's blowing air up through that.
Yeah.
And I just don't see that that's really going to happen in nature.
I mean,
Yeah, no. Not unless, you're right, it'd have to be like some kind of like a hydro, like a vent, like some kind of weird vent under the sand.
With air, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very weird.
Or with carbon dioxide bubbling up from somewhere.
Maybe, yeah.
Thank goodness, because that sounds real scary.
I mean,
It's a lot like like farmers have to worry about grain engulfment, which
Oh,
is
geez.
essentially like
horrible
quicksand,
Oh, that's
being
a
like
big
falling into a
thing, yeah.
silo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Silos
and
silo. I went to
it's
school in an
the
ag
same.
school. They talked a lot about silos and getting trapped in the grain.
Yeah, it's pretty much like it's a type of quicksand essentially. It's just not liquid. It's grain.
Right.
Huh.
So that's
Interesting.
quicksand and how we don't have to worry about it as much as possible. But I just
Yay.
love how weird and strange it is that it's this non-Newtonian substance that doesn't follow rules, but that thankfully we don't have to worry about too much.
That's fascinating. Goodness.
Cool
Thank
topic.
you.
Thanks, Laura.
Cool. Thanks so much for sharing all that information with us. We are going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, it will be Rachel's turn to share some facts with us.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I am really excited about this particular topic this week, particularly because it feels timely with the weather outside being, a little frightful.
Oh boy.
Yeah, where we are. So I wanted to talk to all of you about an animal. It's called, the Latin is Lithobates sylvaticus,
All right.
or also Rena sylvaticus.
Oh, I know it.
What is it, Laura?
It is the wood frog.
It is the wood frog.
Yay, Latin!
Yeah. I'm also very proud. Laura, I don't know if you have heard enough of our podcast, but I generally struggle with the Latin, and I got that.
Yeah, no, that was good.
Yes.
Good job.
You should hear
God.
Kate. Rachel, if you want to feel good about yourself, please listen to ours more and listen to Katie.
Oh,
It
I will.
it's wow.
I try so hard. I practice, and then it gets to recording time, and it's the worst. Anyway, so this week I'm talking about the wood frog. Now,
Love
it may
them.
not seem like the most amazing or strange creature, but looks can be deceiving.
Yes.
I mean, all of us are naturalists, so we might actually know why they're so strange. But so to get into it a little bit, the wood frog, to describe it to everybody else, it is a small, medium-sized frog in the true frog family, about 2 to 2.8 inches in length. Females tend to be larger than males. I guess they can also get up to like 3.25 inches in length, depending. Females
That's
are
big.
larger than males. Yeah, that's a large one.
yeah.
Their general body shape is a frog.
Well described.
Like a frog.
Triangle with legs.
Pretty much a triangle with legs, with larger back legs and smaller front ones. Their general body coloration tends to be shades of brown or tan, but they can also be shades of red, green, or gray. The females tend to be more brightly colored. One of the ways you can tell that it's a wood frog is by a black marking across its eyes. It kind of looks like it went a little overzealous on the eyeliner and just tried to do a cat eye and just went way too far.
Or some people say like a mask.
But what makes it, or it looks like a mask, depending on which way you want to go. I like mine better.
Fair enough.
But they're really fascinating because wood frogs are found throughout the United States, through anywhere from Georgia all the way up. And this is one of the cool, strange things about them. All the way up through the forests of Alaska and the Northeast. They are the only frogs that live north of the Arctic Circle.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
cool.
Wow.
Yeah, which is insane.
It's quite a range. I didn't realize that they went so far north. That's very impressive.
Yeah, they have smaller numbers in like Alabama and more west into like Idaho.
Yeah, I when I worked in
sorry.
Arkansas for a little bit, their range was just shifting through Arkansas because of of climate change. They can't be found in southern Arkansas anymore, only in northern Arkansas.
I mean, it makes sense.
They like it cold.
To me. They do. We'll get into it. We're going to talk about it. So not only are they the only frogs that live north of the Arctic Circle, but one of the reasons why biologists are super interested in wood frogs more recently, I'll get into the main reason in a little while, but it also has a huge it has a how do I say this? It has an ability to have a lot of different types of habitats. Like, it lives in places that you wouldn't expect to see the same type of frog.
Right.
You can find it in peat bogs, you can find it in vernal pools, and ephemeral wetlands, which is where they tend to lay their eggs and be little tadpoles. They can be in uplands, just huge
Just
range.
generalists. Yeah.
They're so general. And biologists are just astounded by just the sheer range that they have. But the biggest thing that I wanted to talk about is that they have been proposed to be the official state amphibian of New York.
That's the biggest thing you want to talk
Interesting.
about?
No, it's not, but it was fun. No, the biggest thing.
Yay for New York.
No, woo. No, that's not the biggest thing. I was trying to make a joke. The biggest thing is, so these are the only frogs and these are one of the only, remember, frogs are amphibians and they are ectothermic. So they're, to use the word everybody else uses, Laura, yep, cold-blooded. So what's really interesting is in the winter, to adapt to all of the different cold climates, they are able to be underneath the leaf litter and their bodies freeze.
Little frogsicles.
Little
Frogsicles.
frogsicles. Now, during this time, what happens is, because of how cold it is, up to 65% or so of their body literally freezes. But the frogs are able to produce a special antifreeze. In reality, it's just a version of glucose. It's called glycogen. And it just makes all of the liquid in their body a little more syrupy, to prevent ice forming from inside of their cells.
So a sugary frogsicle.
It's a sugary frog.
Yeah.
That's the best
Sounds
kind.
delicious.
Right? Sounds amazing. I wouldn't recommend it.
For a raccoon, though.
Hold
I
on.
bet those
Hold on.
raccoons are
It
like.
sounds like you're implying that you have tried it if you can't recommend it.
You can't prove anything, Kirk.
Okay.
Wasn't there actually a frog, wasn't there a frog popsicle that you could get from the ice cream trucks?
If not, there absolutely
I
needs
think
to
so.
be.
There should
Wow.
Should be.
be.
There's a SpongeBob. That's not the same.
I mean, there's also a Spider-Man.
Fair enough.
So what they do is they burrow underneath the leaves that fell the previous fall. They fill their bodies with this glycogen, and it's a type of antifreeze, and it keeps the liquids inside of their cells from freezing, but it does not prevent the spaces in between their cells from freezing. So that means that they stop breathing, their heart stop beating, but they're still alive throughout the winter.
Just absolutely.
Yeah, which is so crazy.
mind-blowing.
Like they're dead, but not
They're
dead.
dead, but they're not.
Right.
And it's one of those, in like their fertilized eggs are not harmed by freezing either. So if they lay eggs before
I didn't know
in the
that.
winter, their eggs won't be harmed by freezing temperatures either.
Well-
They are able to handle that.
I guess an egg is just a big cell. So
Yeah.
it sort of makes sense.
Yeah. So what happens is they have the glycogen, and once it prevents the ice from forming inside of the cell, and then once temperatures start rising again, the ice, as it does in springtime, it melts, and it melts within the frog. But what's really fascinating, and we're still not 100% sure how they do this, but the frog thaws from the inside out.
Yeah, it's like I was reading about that. Something about like they don't know.
We don't know how it
knows
does
how to
that.
do it.
Yeah, because they're ectothermic. They get their body heat from outside of themselves. So you would think that they would thaw from the outside in, but if they did that, that would burst their cells and they would die. So they are actually thawing themselves out from the inside out, which we have no idea. Science has no idea how they're able to do that. And they're able to do that well before their hibernating neighbors are able, or like have come out of hibernation or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So they're given a type of head start because they're able to have a pick of whatever sites, whatever vernal pools to lay their eggs, and there won't be necessarily anything that's going to eat them, or eat their eggs rather. It just to like reiterate, not only does the heart beat stop and they stop breathing, but brain activity also ceases. And his body is
Just
more
dead.
or less frozen.
Yeah.
Is
Wow.
clinically dead.
And the
by
fact that the heart
mid-winter.
just like restarts.
Starts. Yeah.
Yeah, it just
Amazing.
it's truly phenomenal, and they do this year after year. I think this does have a little bit, and this is just me talking, not necessarily what science says, but wood frogs generally live about 3 years, and
Okay.
I would expect that having to freeze yourself, produce the glycogen, thaw yourself out, and doing that multiple times, I feel like that would take a toll and like
I
have
would
some
imagine,
sort of
yeah.
effect on your lifespan. So I'm not surprised that they have such a low time, or like time
Short lifespan?
is
Yeah.
the word I was like, yeah. Short lifespan. And the thing is, they're able to freeze solid for up to 8 months each year.
Can you imagine like only 4 months of your life you're even alive?
Wow.
Just nuts.
I mean, a great nap.
Right?
I was thinking, I was
Solid
like,
nap.
well,
Very restful.
Yeah.
I was kind
During
of
the
contemplating
pandemic,
that. Yeah.
I kind of wish I could be the wood frog.
Right.
That would be
but-
really nice. Yeah. So yeah, they're able to. They thaw in the spring. What happens is they thaw from the inside outward. Their heart starts beating first, and then their brain activates, and then their legs begin to move. And we still, obviously, like I said, we don't know what starts the heart after being frozen. The craziest thing too is I said that they're the only frog that's been found in the Arctic Circle. Just to give you a little more on that, is they not only are in the Arctic Circle, but they're found in Alaska's record temperature, like lowest temperature ever set, which was
cool.
oh gosh, what was it? I think let me look at this here for a second.
Minus
I
a lot of degrees.
Believe
Right.
minus so many degrees. It was there it is. It was minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh, I suppose once you're
Wow.
frozen, you're
Wow.
frozen. You're not going to
Yeah.
get
That's
more
what I was going to
frozen.
say. It doesn't
Right.
matter how cold.
Right. The other cool thing about wood frogs that I want to touch on with all of you is scientists have found that they're able to tell whether or not a frog is their sibling or not. They can tell.
Oh, cool.
The tadpoles are able to identify, like, oh, hey, you're
Oh.
a sibling of mine.
Sweet.
And siblings will seek each other out and they'll group together.
Oh, that's
So-
cute.
Very cool.
They're the best species to recognize their family. It's fun.
There's a
That's what I
video
have for
of them thawing you can find online. It's really cool.
Absolutely go and check that out.
And what was I gonna say? Oh, Wouldn't it be cool? I mean, if scientists could figure out like exactly the whole glycogen thing, like imagine like cryogenic possibilities for humans.
They're working on that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, these conditions regularly, like, these would kill most other animals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just how it works, and it doesn't.
But like we could like, freeze ourselves to go to Mars, or freeze yourself and then find a cure for a disease that you had later, or like, whoa.
It's just nuts.
Be wild.
All right. Well, that's what
That was
I
a
have
great
for you.
one.
Thank you. We're going to take a break, and when we return, it'll be Victoria.
All right, we're back. This week I am last but not least, and I want to tell you about John Gould. He is
Who?
he's a PhD candidate in animal behavior.
What's the name? Okay.
Probably not the John Gould you're thinking of. He's
We'll see.
He's at Newcastle University in Australia, and he specializes in amphibians.
Hey.
Yeah, Australia and amphibians. But this actually, my topic is not about amphibians at all.
I'm feeling it. Oh, not those kinds of amphibians?
The amphibians are just, you'll see where we're going. Okay. So
Okay.
What?
one
Let
evening,
it happen.
one evening he was out in the field. He was peering at tadpoles in ephemeral pools, as
Like you do.
amphibian behaviorists are wont to do, exactly. So he was observing these tadpoles, but he also noticed something unusual about a small beetle in the water. The beetle was upside down. So at first he thought it had just fallen into the pool, but then
Is it not like a back swimmer?
no, it wasn't a back swimmer.
Okay.
He realized that the beetle was actually walking upside down on the underside of the water.
Yeah.
Dude,
Very
that's
cool.
Yo,
cool.
what?
Yes,
What?
Walking on the bottom of the
instead of-
water, like
on the underside of the
I
surface.
mean, I've heard of insects like
Yeah.
we all
using
have.
water tension on top. But
Yeah.
underneath?
uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I've heard of like like the back swimmer or water boatman, but not
Right.
walking.
Yeah, so most people,
Please tell us
Rachel,
more.
you alluded to water striders. There's the little insects that can kind of skate around on
Yeah.
the surface of still water. And there are several other species of insects and some spiders that can do this. And, the way they can do this is due to the surface tension of water. So basically all water molecules are attracted to other water molecules. But since the top layer of molecules in the pond or whatever doesn't have any other water molecules above it, they cling more tightly to the ones to the sides and below them, and that creates the surface tension. So it's just a little bit stronger on top.
It's
And
a lot
animals-
stronger when they do a belly
Well,
flop.
Right.
Like a skin.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it hurts so much.
Mhm. But unlike us doing a belly flop, animals that are small and lightweight enough can basically bounce off the surface if they are also adapted to have water repellent feet. So water striders, for example, have a lot of hairs on their legs, and they're coated with a kind of a waxy substance which repels the water and also traps a little bubble of air around their feet. So this, in combination with the surface tension, lets them kind of glide along and not sink in.
Okay.
But what was this beetle doing, and how was it doing it on the underside of the water?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Mr. Gould captured the beetle, I believe, and he was able to identify it as a water scavenger beetle, which is in the family Hydrophilidae.
Okay.
They're pretty common.
Hydrophilidae, you say?
Yes.
Hydro like water?
Yes,
Yep. Water loving.
something like that. Yeah, they're a pretty widespread family of water beetles. But they are known to carry an air bubble with them, which is actually pretty common behavior in aquatic insects.
Right.
A lot of insects carry a bubble around with them that they use to breathe and for buoyancy.
Convenient.
It's like the bubblehead charm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so you can see, there's a video he took. So you can see that the air bubble for this beetle is squeezed in between the insect's abdomen, basically its belly, and the surface of the water. So scientists think that maybe this the force of the bubble helps keep the insect upside down and pressed up against the surface of the water.
Because it's like lifting up to the surface. Right?
Yeah. So it's kind of holding onto the
Wow.
bubble and it's lifting it up to the surface. And he said that when he watched the beetle, he could see the feet kind of poking up little miniature hills of water above the surface.
Oh, wow.
cool.
So the
As it
opposite
walked.
of like a water
Wow.
strider. Yeah.
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 Huh.
The
It's
weird
like pushing the water up?
Yeah. So if you think about a water strider, it's kind of poking the water down a little bit. So
Yeah.
this is just doing the same thing from the other side.
So
That's
cool.
crazy.
Wow.
I wonder if water striders are super confused. Like, is that my shadow?
What are you doing down
the
there?
I
heck?
mean, I would be.
Yeah.
I would be very confused.
Yeah. So he wrote this up in a paper that was published. But interestingly, when he was doing his literature review, he discovered that this ability had been mentioned in passing in the scientific literature, but no one had ever really investigated it before. And apparently, this was fairly well known among aquatic beetle specialists that they can do this. And they actually
It's just accepted.
they used it to they used it to collect beetles more easily. They would sort of stir up the bottom of the pond, and then the beetles would come up to the surface and just
Oh, cool.
hang out there, and they would scoop them up.
Oh.
But no one
Hey.
had ever thought to write it up or investigate it more closely.
Man, that's awesome. That would be such a great, like, oh my gosh, how's nobody did this before me?
Yeah. So there are still some questions to be answered. Like, it would be
Yeah.
interesting to find out exactly what parts of the beetle's body are water repellent. So if you think about the water strider having, on the surface of the water, having water repellent feet, you might think that this beetle would have to have feet that are attracted to water, and the rest of its body would be water repellent so that it could hold the bubble.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Okay.
Interesting.
But could this beetle also walk on the top surface of the water? Who knows? And, potentially there could be some applications in robotics, because robotics researchers have created water strider-like robots. So you wonder if they
Yeah.
could do it for
That's fascinating.
the other side.
Reverse. Yeah, this seems more
For
stealthy.
the
like
upside down, I believe they
underwater.
call it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what this is? This is like a fancier version of having like a reed.
Yeah.
Like Robin Hood
What is
style.
this?
Like,
Yeah, Robin Hood like breathing tube
Snorkel.
with the
Snorkel.
reed. Snorkel.
Yeah,
yeah.
That's it.
reed snorkel.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that.
Exactly.
I love that where your example came from, Rachel, is Robin Hood
Thank you.
instead of a snorkel.
What I'm visualizing did you guys, when you were younger, you had those boogie boards, and I always would try and force them underwater. I'd try and get
All
on
the
top
time.
of it.
Oh, it won't go. Yeah.
But it's like
Yeah.
impossible. So you're like
You do
wrapped
that
around
with-
it, and then it
yeah.
flips, and then you are upside down holding onto this boogie board. I'm imagining that's how the beetle is with this bubble.
I think that's an apt description, Laura.
So that was my relatively short and sweet topic for you this
Cool.
week.
Nice. Thanks so
Awesome.
much.
Thank you, Victoria.
You're welcome. Well, it's been super fun to have you on as a guest, Laura. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thanks for
thank
inviting
you.
me.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming. It's been great.
Yeah. I love getting to share my weird nature stuff with other fellow weird nature lovers.
Woohoo!
Like, this is where it's at.
That's us.
Weird nature lovers. Well, thanks for coming or listening, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks everyone for listening to today's show. Be sure to subscribe. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and we love sharing this strange world with all of our listeners. If you would be so kind as to leave us a 5-star review, that would be great. It lets other lovers of the strange discover the show. You can reach out to us on social media by searching for Strange by Nature Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can send us an email as well. Our address is contact@strangebynaturepodcast.com. If you want more information about the show, you can also check out our website, which is strangebynaturepodcast.com. Until next week, get outside, stay curious, and embrace the strange.